Alright, so lesson 2, designing and evaluating portfolio assessment in the classroom. So now, we are going to describe the process of planning and implementing portfolio assessment in the classroom. But before we going to start our lesson properly, allow me to read first the intended learning outcomes. So class, our intended learning outcomes at the end of the lesson, the students will be able to develop and evaluate portfolio assessment utilized in the classroom. Since nakabalo naman ta sa nature of portfolio, its purposes, types, and components, which been discussed by my co-member, as of this point, we will going to clarify the steps in designing and evaluating portfolio as an assessment tools. So throughout this discussion, we will know about the general procedure that we may use in crafting and implementing portfolio assessment in the classroom. So what is portfolio development? Or may just ask, what comes into your mind when you heard the word portfolio development or portfolio? So now most of the people, when they hear the word portfolio, there are many images, different images that comes up into their minds. So others may think of collecting their works for reviews. For teachers often use to contain, gather some examples of lesson plan or mga documents that can reflect the knowledge and skills of the students. So class, the portfolio development requires learners to collect and integrate examples of their works and allow teacher to assess their learners as well. So this portfolio provides you many ways or multiple of ways to assess the learning of the students over time. So kani siya na assessment tools is nagahatag siyang opportunities dili lang sa learners kundi po sa teachers to better understand the educational process in a wider perspective. Steps for developing portfolio assessment. So sa pag-design of portfolio assessment class, nag-require siya some advanced and careful planning. So magsugod jud ni siya with a clear idea kung unsay purpose sa imong assessment. So in developing portfolio assessment, natay mga steps na kailangan nato mahibalan. Why? Kay mao man guni siya ang atong guide kung pabuhaton ta og portfolio assessment in the future. So the steps for developing portfolio assessment are aligned with the teaching and learning assessment to the curriculum and learning activities as well. So step number 1, identifying overall purpose and focus. So the design and use of portfolio begins with a clear description of your purpose and focus. So naatay duwa ka question na kailangan nato i-consider. Number 1, why do I want a portfolio? And number 2, what learning target and curriculum goal would it serve? So this will sharpen the focus of identifying the purpose and focus of the portfolio. So with this class, you can clearly identify why you want your students to create a portfolio. So by considering the two questions, again, number 1 question, why do I want a portfolio? Number 2 question, what learning target and curriculum goals would it serve? Okay? So in step 1, natay mga list of questions on how to prepare and use portfolio. Number 1 question, who will construct the portfolio? So kinsa day mo construct sa portfolio kung bisayaon pa nato ni na pangutana. So ang portfolio ginagamit siya class mostly sa mga student. Nagaserve siya as a guide or direction para mas masas nato as a teacher or future teacher ang atong mga estudyante. So ang portfolio manggod, daghan siyag meaning and it is a process that serve as a variety of purposes. And a portfolio, it is a collection of students' works that exhibit their efforts, ilang progress, and their achievement in one or more areas. So kani pong si portfolio is naga-examine of the students selected samples of work experience, documents related to the outcomes being assessed. Kani po si portfolio is naga-address and naga-support towards achieving academic goals including students' efficacy. So, who will construct the portfolio? Mostly ang mga estudyante. This is ang center ani niya kay ang mga estudyante, student center. Number 2, what type of portfolio do you want to use? So, since ang portfolio class have a broad potential and can be used for the assessment of students' performance for a variety of purposes in course of curriculum areas, the content and criteria used to assess the portfolio dapat align pod sa imong purpose. For example, if imong purpose is cognitive processes are intended for the assessment, so ang content nimo, ang rubrics nimo must be designed to meet the process, to meet the cognitive processes. So, ang type of portfolio kay nagadepende siya sa teacher kung unsay effective para sa estudyante. Because, di ba, ang student is lahi-lahing abilities and capabilities. So, you as a teacher, you need to use an effective way or method in which mag-work sa ilaha. So again, ang type of portfolio na imong gamiton is magdepende siya sa imuhang intended learning outcomes or unsay effective for the students. So number 3, what are the purposes and objectives of the portfolio? So di ba kung walay purpose and objectives, wala po tayo sa atong assessment, dili ta maka-reach sa ato ang goals or sa atong intended learning outcome for the student. This is how important the purpose and objective is to your portfolio. So, dapat na-adjud kay ma-reach na goals or ma-reach na intended or intention nimo sa imuhang mga estudyante. Number 4, what categories of work samples should go into the portfolio? So, sa portfolio man god, naga-focus ni siya sa atong pag-integrate nato sa atong assessment, like mga instructional na ma-promote nato ang meaningful learning. So, I believe na mahimong effective ang learning if successful pod ang pagbuhat natong assessment sa means sa portfolio. So, ang portfolio, it is designed manggod to provide for students an opportunity to become more reflective about sa ilahang ginapabuhat or gipangbuhat while demonstrating their abilities to learn and achieve in academics. So kaning kuan as an educator, you need to be critical or wise sa imong ginabuhat or ipabuhat sa imuhang mga estudyante. For example, sa pagdevelop sa rubrics, criteria, guidelines, and most especially kung say format na relevant sa atong students sa pagbuhat og portfolio. So, number 5, what criteria will students or groups use to select their entries? So, as an educator or future educator, naatay guidelines or criteria na gina-follow. So, kung unsa tong standard criteria or rubrics na pwede makatabang to help your student build and grow themselves, mo tong imong i-apply sa ilaha para mas ma-expand ang ilahang knowledge. Number 6, now the last question. Who will develop the rubrics to assess and evaluate the portfolios? So, sa pagbuhat og portfolio, pwede teacher and students. Pero, mostly kay students ang ginapabuhat sa portfolio kay maumanggod ni siya ang guide nato sa mga educator to assess our students' performance sa ilang mga performance based sa atong ginapanghatag na assessment. Formative ba na siya or samat. So, by this manggod, it will be our way para mas effective ang atong pag-evaluate sa ilaha. Next, it is important to distinguish between learning targets for individual work samples and the content of portfolio as a whole. The targets that reflect all content tends to be broader and more general, such as development as a reader, adapts writing to audience, speaks clearly, and adapts writing style to different purposes. So class as an educator or future educator, we really need to know between learning targets. For example, their difference capability. Kung saan nato ba as an educator pag-evaluate sa ilang tagsa-tagsa na mga skills like in reading, writing, or sa ilang aspect kung sila strength, unsa sila hina. So, as an educator in strength, it is better to assess or teach those students by adds up more of their knowledge. So, in weaknesses naman, we as an educator, we need to help our students to strengthen and boost their confidence. Encourage them ba na mas buhaton nila ang ilang best sa mga assessment na imo pang ihatag sa ilaha. Like, to encourage them to do better next time. So, no, ang atong role as an educator is really important to mold and expand the learning of the student. And the portfolio as well, the portfolio assessment is also important in curriculum for us future educator or educator para broad ang atong perspectives in terms of giving evaluation and assessment. So in this way, we can identify sa atong mga kakulangan or because sa mga resulta natong ipanghatag sa or katong mga target lesson kanang feedback nila kung na ba si student natun-an or wala. Step number 2. Once the purpose and target has been clarified, we need to think and identify the physical structure of the portfolio. So we have here are some practical questions affect the successful use of portfolio in your classroom. Number 1, what it will look like. Unsay dagway niya. Number 2, where will the students place the output? Number 3, what type of container is appropriate? Number 4, do they need file folders, clear book, plastic bins? Number 5, how are the materials to be organized? Is it categorically, numerically, alphabetically, by subject area, or in other ways? Last question, number 6, where can students store the portfolios for easy access? So class, mo siyang question na kailangan na to consider in identifying the physical structure, the structure of the portfolio. So let us remember, no, kung ang atong estudyante dili ka manage or dili ka assess ilahang materials effectively, they become what? Discouraged. So you as a teacher or a future teacher, you really need to use your original intention based on the answer to practical consideration. So the choices of products manggod and works output naga-influence siya sa student kung unsa lang ilang i-include sa ilahang portfolio. So based sa akong na-experience as a student kay in grade 12 gipabuhat mig portfolio in sa among Filipino subject. So ang physical structure namo is gina-allow lang mini teacher to be as creative as we are, kung unsay dagway niya, kung asa na mo siya ibutang, but as long as ma-meet na mo ang ihang gusto na makitaan sa amuang portfolio. Like for example, being creative, because that is also one of his requirements. And also kanang naemi kailangan i-compile sa mga work namo, our own work sa among portfolio na kailangan namo i-compile, that is I think numerically that time. So magdepende jud si ang physical structure sa rubrics or sa criteria ni teacher kung